The Mara smartphone factory was inaugurated in 2019 in the presence of President Cyril Ramaphosa. The now defunct facility was built with half of the 1.5 billion rand loan from Standard Bank and the Industrial Development Corporation. The remaining funds were used to secure the company's operations. Mara Smartphones has since gone under after only 9 months in business. The company's officials have stated that its devices haven't sold as planned due to the COVID-19 pandemic impact on its business. Today, the local management of Mara Phones has made a direct bid to the IDC to buy back the factory at the Dube Trade Port from lenders who took ownership of it. Now, joining us to discuss this further is Vermuelen, editor-at-large at MyBroadband. Jan, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, just 9 months of operation, really a short-lived project this. Was this project doomed well, from the start?
Good morning. Yes, in hindsight it was, and it's because there didn't seem to be a clear strategy to spur uptake. There was no clear strategy to say this is how Mara is going to be better than Samsung, and why you should be, if you've got 5,000 rand to spend on a phone, you should be spending it on a Mara smartphone rather than a Samsung smartphone. This is what we do better. There was just unfortunately no clear go-to-market strategy there, and if you're entering a flooded market like smartphones, then you're going to have to come in cheaper and better than your competition. Otherwise, you're dead in the water.
I mean, look, it was a COVID-19 pandemic, according to the management at the operator, that hurt its business. But do you believe that this business could have survived post or pre the pandemic, specifically in South Africa?
I think the pandemic, accelerated businesses falls that were already going to be struggling in the first place. So maybe it would have had a bit more runway if it weren't for COVID. But if your phones aren't selling, then you've got a problem. They highlighted 3 problems. The one was lack of uptake. The other one was that they had to halt production due to the pandemic. And the last one was that they were hoping for government contracts to materialize that never materialized, because they were going to be this preferred supplier as a locally manufactured phone, right? So every time there's a government contract that requires phones, Mara would be first in line because they're locally manufactured. But if your strategy is government contracts, then you need 4 years of runway at least before you see a cent from the government. That's just, how long optimistically a tender process can take from the start of the tender to the day you get your first money. So if you don't have a long runway set aside like that before you even start generating cash flow, you're in trouble from the begining.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that it's a South African manufacturer, but not really a South African company. I mean, it's domiciled in Dubai, at least the Mara Global Corporation, that is. So, as you mentioned, that runway would have had to be pretty long, but that was not all that was seemingly a problem at Mara Smartphones, especially in Durban. We've heard some disturbing views of employees about how the conditions were, conditions of employment in particular.
Yes, so after this all went down, after we heard about the factory being put up for auction, we started hearing from employees at the factory who said that they were subject to, the food served at the canteen wasn't particularly good, that it was vegetarian only, that they were not allowed to bring in their own food with meat in it. But, that's sort of just you might be able to write that off as a convenience thing. Then, we also heard from employees saying that they were made to stand for 9 hours straight, even if there was no production at their particular part of the line. And that women were required to not wear bras because apparently the metal pieces trigger the metal detectors. We did ask Mara for comment on this, but we haven't received feedback. But some pretty harsh allegations from former staff at the factory.
Yeah, Mara Corp is an international multi-sector business. It's got businesses in at least 24 countries. Whopping 22 of those are on the African continent. How is the business, the company's business in other countries on the continent?
Apparently quite good. We asked them because there's a very similar kind of facility in Rwanda, and we asked, how's how's business doing in Rwanda? And they said, no, it's actually great. They, in particular, did not have to shut down the factory during COVID-19 and could continue production. And they highlighted that as one of the reasons that the Rwanda factory was able to do well. But once again, if you have a business that allows you to, say, export from Rwanda up into North Africa, or they've made reasonable inroads in, the Northern African market, then there's it's understandable that there might be some staying power there. Unfortunately, the South African business didn't even, really get off the ground. Let alone gaining traction in South Africa. Getting into Southern Africa wasn't even a thought yet before it was decided to scrap the facility.
It didn't get off the ground, but employees were then not retrenched. We also have seen reports that apparently the tax that they were supposed to pay to SARS on behalf of the employees also wasn't paid. So a lot more than just a failure in terms of COVID-19 then for this business.
Yeah, there seem to be a lot of operational failures as well. So as you say, the employees allege that the money withheld for pay-as-you-earn was not actually paid over to SARS, and crucially, that they were not handed retrenchment letters, and so they struggled or actually found it impossible to apply for UIF and for the social relief of distress grant because they were still listed as being employed.
Sure. Okay, so now Mara Smartphones are looking to buy back the plant in Durban Port. What does that mean for the business? Are they ready to get back on their feet?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's no real details from them about what the turnaround plan is. But yes, a group of managers that took over in 2021, so in the throes of the pandemic, a new CEO was appointed, and there was new management appointed, and a group of these managers have formed what they call a buyout group to buy back the factory from lenders. I'm not sure where they would raise the money from. I'm not sure what their offer is, but the IDC has said that they are considering all offers, including this one from the management buyout group.
Now let's look at the government looking to support Mara Smartphones, which it's a Dubai-based company, or at least it's a part of a Dubai-based company. Instead of trying to get a young startup in South Africa that can build their own smartphones, is that something that's too far-fetched? Can we not do our own technological innovations in the country?
I'm sure we could. It's got to do with making sure you've got the infrastructure and the brand and all that stuff in place. Now, the reason you go with something, a brand like Mara, which has demonstrated quite a commitment to the African continent, is that you would hope that there is a big push globally in terms of marketing and brand awareness and so on. And so you have a far better shot of making a go of it rather than launching a purely South African smartphone brand, because unfortunately, saying something is made in South Africa, we even saw this with Mara, but saying something is made in South Africa is not good enough. The South African consumer, by and large, doesn't care where something is made. It has to be better and cheaper than what they can get otherwise. Otherwise, they're not interested. So if you're made in South Africa, that's all fine and well, but what are you doing that's better than Samsung? And so launching a smartphone, let's start, fairly small scale. Let's just talk about an assembly plant in South Africa. To have something that will ultimately be a sustainable business, to start with, one should really look at established brands like a Samsung, like a Huawei, and potentially something a little more on the startup end of the scale, like Mara. But if you're going to go with a brand like Mara, then you have to have a strategy of how you are going to stand your ground against the established players from Samsung to Xiaomi.
I mean, you speak of those established brands, and if you compare them to Mara, usability comes then into focus. From what I've seen just on social media and various platforms, the usability functions is between great and not good at all. Have you at all had a chance to get your hands on the phone and just get some, your thoughts on how it functions and whether it's actually worth the rand that it costs?
Yes, unfortunately, we were not able to get our hands on any of these phones to test them out before they went under. But looking at the hardware specifications in general, it is a cheaper device. They're using chipsets that would not be my preferred chipset, and with that comes pitfalls, right? So if you use a cheaper chipset, then I've had problems with that chipset before, in particular, where things like Google Maps doesn't function as you need it to or hope it would, and so on. So when you do look at the cheaper hardware, as opposed to the more established brands like Samsung and Hisense, and Huawei that do their own chips and make sure that the chips are high quality. You do run into challenges, and that's usually where the phone suffers first, is if you go with a cheap chipset, and then the functionality suffers as a result.
And Vermuelen, thank you so much for your time this morning. He's the editor-at-large at MyBroadband, just unpacking that Mara smartphones debacle for us there.